Recording, yeah, I think it's recording. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the Charvak podcast, patrons only discussion. Today, we are going to be discussing chapter 3 titled The Chronology of the Rigveda. In case if you've missed the first two chapters, you can go on the Patreon page and you can check it out. The link is there. I would highly recommend you do that because if you watch this and don't watch the previous two, you're not going to get what's happening. So, now, before we get into the discussion, I actually wanted to attend two questions that I had received from patrons on the message on Patreon. So I'm going to start with Anita's question. Anita, I'm just going to read. Anita had said, I was reading chapter 3 in preparation for the discussion. And while researching on some related topics, I had this question, which I wonder if you can answer. Shrikantji says the spoke wheel was invented around 2000 BCE, and that the newer Rigveda mandalas mention this a lot and the older mandalas don't, proving that the spoke wheel couldn't have been invented before that time period. I have followed Nilesh Oak's works where he uses astronomy to date the epic Mahabharata. Some events based on astronomical evidence definitely goes beyond 2000 BCE. Both have used scientific methods for their work. So how can we reconcile the two? Does Talagiri's work contradict Nilesh's work? Now, to answer the first part of this, I'm going to say this is why Shrikant Talagiri says the spoked wheel can't be found beyond 2400 BCE in India. Why, Anita? The reason that is, as you know, Shrikant Talagiri has divided. I mean, we're going to study it in today's chapter. Basically, is the chronology of the Rigveda. What is the chronology? There are the old books and the new books. The new books, the date Shrikant Talagiri has given is 2400 to I think 1700 BCE. That is the range Talagiri gives, if I remember correctly. It's either 1700 the lower target or 1400. I think it's 1700. Devayan type kar dena yaar, meko yaad nahi hai. So I think it was 1700 if I remember. Now considering that and the words which specifically mention the spokes, right? They are all in the new books, in the new mandalas. So the spoked wheel in India can't be found previous to that date. As of now, the Sanoli chariot, right? A lot of people have been talking about the Sanoli chariot that has been found in India. Well, first of all, it's not a spoked wheel. The Sanoli chariot is not a spoked wheel. It is a single solid wheel. So we've actually not even found that. But if we end up finding that, and if the chronology of Shrikant Talagiri is correct, we will not find a spoked wheel in India at least before that. This has nothing to do with what is the date of the spoked wheel that has been found, outside India. That is a separate issue. We are not discussing that. So let us not mix the two over here. Now on to the second one. Now I want to say this with full responsibility. I have nothing personal against Nilesh Nilkantok. I'm sure he's a nice person. He must be a great human being, and in his heart, he means well. But I don't know if we can use screen share in this one. Can we? I don't see a screen share. Okay, we have a share content option. I wish I could share this picture with you guys, which
share
is
content is share the screen.
Okay, so I'll do this. I'll share a screen with you guys. I have a photo which I want to share with you all. Let me take it out. I want to show you what are Nileshji's claims. Where is it? Let me find. Because I was discussing this with a friend of mine about his claims. And I was like, yeah, we can't really agree with these claims. Where did the photo go? Yes, got it. Cool. Now let me try the share screen. Okay, screen. Don't tag. You guys see this? Foundations of the Vedic civilization, time Kal.
Yeah.
This is Nilesh Nilkant Oak's claim. See the date he gives, 22,000 plus BCE through 6 millennium BCE Rigveda. Now he uses the chronology of Talagiri. You see here? 63742 589. It's pretty similar to Talagiri's chronology. I don't want to get into it whether it's exact or not. That's a separate issue. This is his claim. Now I'll stop the screen share and I'll tell you where we have problems. First of all, see, whenever we make a claim, now what we try to do is that there's this Professor Gad Sad. I don't know how many of you have heard of him. He's a professor of evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology in Montreal. And he uses a very nice term, which is not his term, but it's used in science in general. It's called a nomological network of cumulative evidence, where what we do is we look at different fields and we create a network by mapping all the things available in the different fields. Now, what do the different fields talk about? So, when it comes to the question of RN invasion, RN migration, right? So, the primary fields are genetics, archaeology, and linguistics. What is the main claim in linguistics? The main claim in linguistics is that the Proto-Indo-European language split around 3000 BCE. So if now, does the Proto-Indo-European language split map with what we have seen in archaeological evidences found till now in Europe and India? And if you look across the Danube Valley or the Pontian Caspian steppes, or you look at Indus Valley civilization and you carbon date these things and you look at the development of pottery and all that things, it pretty much falls in the same date. And you look at genetic data and you look at the step entry into India, they are all falling in a particular time frame. Second, the latest cell paper, if I remember correctly again, and correct me if I'm wrong, the advent of or the invention of agriculture in India, which was now claimed to be independently done, is not before, I think, 9000 BCE. If I remember correctly, Devan, if you remember, let me know. Yes, right? 9000 BCE was the claim in that paper. Now, if agriculture is itself invented at 9000 BCE, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Rigveda, all these books, they talk about a society that is post-agriculture. You see what I'm trying to say? These are societies that are proper civilizations. They have proper, complexes, sewage systems, etc., etc. These are not hunter-gatherer societies where people go from one corner to the other. These are serious people living sedentary lifestyles. Now, if the current evidence overall says that agriculture itself was invented around 9K BCE, how the hell can Rigveda be 22,000 BCE? So, personally speaking, this, this whole archaeoastronomy, and again, I don't want to come off as a jackass. Really, I don't, because, I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who are trying to do good things in this subject. But I just don't buy the claims of Nilesh Neelkanth. And this doesn't come from a place of malice. I just don't see the claims matching. And I don't want to come off as a jackass. Believe me, I don't. But I just don't think the claims are scientific. I mean, you can check the people who debate with him about his specific claims when it comes to astronomy too, because they just don't match. And I'm not an expert in these astronomical dating things, but there was this guy called Prafull something, and he had written this book, yeah, dating the era of Lord Rama too. And I had read that book a long time ago, and I mean it had similar claims, and honestly they don't match. Even BB Lal, like good. I have this book, The Historicity of the Mahabharata by BB Lal, and he eventually does date the Mahabharata too. Where was his tentative date? I think Mahabharata, BB Lal's date was around either something around 900 to 1200 BCE. Let me read. If I remember correctly. Okay, so Ice Jagannathan has confirmed that. Good. Thank you. I don't have to search the book now. because see, I read so many books that I don't remember everything, but I know tentative dates. So good. So you guys have read some of them. So B.B. Lal's date is 900 to 1200 BCE on the basis of the archaeological excavations in the area that is mentioned in the Mahabharata. You guys can go and read the book. It's a very small book, 150 pages. For a 90-year-old guy, we should support him. So this is my answer, that Nilesh Neelkant Oak's claim that he makes. It is not available, man. I got this book on Amazon. Why do I get all the books and you guys don't get anything, man? So Nilesh Neelkant Oak is the outlier in this entire debate. It's like everybody else that comes up with a certain line of evidence does not match with Nilesh Neelkant Oak. And leave everything aside. Agriculture itself, not in India, it might be 9000 BCE, but overall also, didn't we have the Ice Age like 12th, I think around 12K, right? Ice Age was 12K or something. So how can Rigveda be 22,000 BCE? I mean, we just need to ask, these basic questions. I hope that clarifies your question, Anita. So now let me take the other question. Ajinkya had asked this question. By the way, I like this question, Ajinkya. It was a very interesting question, and good that you're on the podcast too. So Ajinkya said, I just have one question. When I heard a talk by Tony Joseph, he was saying the mass migration made the native Indians become a closed society and start practicing endogamy, that is, marry within the close group they belong to, which they say is the origin of the caste system. Now, first, I want to talk about this. Again, I might trigger a few of you, but hear me out. See, there is a standard line sold, I think, right now by a lot of people that caste is a Western imposition. I don't think so. Caste is a Western imposition. Caste is a human imposition. This is my opinion. In fact, there is this romanticism done everywhere in the world. You should check my podcast with a scholar that, he's just written a paper. It's going to be published, Ronojoy Bhattacharya. And
I saw that, yes.
Yeah, so what we were discussing was that let us assume that, the Harappans were non-Aryans. But even the Harappans had caste. Even the Harappans were hierarchical. I am willing to concede the Aryan invasion argument and say Harappans were casteist too. Basically, everybody is casteist. Why is everybody casteist? Just think of it in an evolutionary way. Agriculture comes up. All of us become sedentary. Hierarchies are a direct outcome of a sedentary lifestyle. Look, the least hierarchical societies are hunter-gatherer societies. We have enough anthropological data and our data across the world when we study, tribes who live the hunter-gatherer lifestyle today, that they are far less hierarchical. But they are not egalitarian. Don't get me wrong. They are absolutely dominating in some aspects. They are not egalitarian, but they also have a sort of a hierarchy. I mean, you can check the African tribes today, and you can check other. Jagannathan, don't make me laugh, man. My Islamophobia is showing. So that's the first answer to your question. I want to get that aside. So the claim that Tony Joseph is making, that why is he making that claim? Ajinkya, is very important. If you look at the genetic data, right, our genetic data from the last 2000 years, this is the post Arthashastra era. Again, Devayan, if you have checked the dates, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was this latest paper which was clearly stating that post Arthashastra, in the last 2000 odd years, we've actually stopped intermarrying amongst each others, amongst jatis. So that could be a precursor for caste. But see, we don't want to get into the debate of whether it's uniquely Indian or not. I think it's just globally available everywhere. Indians just did, my personal opinion is Indians bloody well did a PhD in it. They created a caste and class hierarchy both. Both. We created it. And it's been increasing since the last 2000 years. But I will also want to add here that the Islamic invasion of India certainly made it ape shit. It definitely made it ape shit. That is also equally true. Both. And India is a messed up society because we have a class and caste hierarchy both. Now this is what Tony Joseph is saying in the book. I have read his book. So Joseph is basically trying to make that point. Look, I'm not saying Joseph is some messiah, don't get me wrong, but I have to be fair to Tony Joseph. So his claim was that. So let us clear that part. Now to the next part, what you have written is, so Ajinkya says, now I have a problem with this. AIT proponents usually say Brahmins, upper caste introduced endogamy. At the same time, they say upper caste people carry Aryan genes. So we have two arguments. One, natives invented endogamy out of fear of mass migration of outsiders since they wanted to preserve their community intact. Or two, Brahmins imposed it on natives since Brahmins wanted to civilize them. This is contradicting. If upper castes were outsiders, why did they start endogamic caste system which they make themselves, which which will make them always outsiders? This is a very good point, Ajinkya. The whole thing is because he assumes that the caste system came from outside. That assumption itself is flawed. There was caste and hierarchical structures everywhere. There was no Aryan migration and invasion. You can just look at it this way. We can comfortably say that the IVC, see, the mature phase is the new Rigvedic phase, right? So 2400 BCE, he has blocked me on Twitter. I have no need to. Okay, all right. So the mature Harappan phase is what they call, I think, 2400 BCE to 1500 BCE or 1400 BCE. This is your mature Harappan phase. Now the Harappan phase before that is more scattered. So just think about it like this. The only lens that I use in my life whenever I want to look at anything is the lens of evolution. Just look at it this way. How do we evolve as a society? The more we evolve, the more numbers we get, the more tribal we get. Tribal in not in the derogatory sense, tribal in the anthropological sense. I'm using the word tribal as in groupism. In science, tribalism is used in the form of groupism. So that is my point. So there is nothing that Tony Joseph is trying to put caste in a very weird way, as it is uniquely something gotten thanks to the Rigveda. First of all, the Rigvedic verse which they bring about what is that? The Purusha Sukta, right?
Yes.
Purusha Sukta, all it says is what is the nature of the divine Purusha, right? This is Brahman, this is Kshatriya. Nowhere does it say X is inferior, Y is superior. Also, we can comfortably say that the Purusha Sukta is in the 10th mandala, right? Somebody, 10.90, is that the verse? Purusha Sukta, can somebody... I think it is the last mandala, the 10th mandala. I think it's 10.90. Let me see the exact verse. Somebody says, need to ask Zakir Naik. Purusha Sukta. Funny. Everybody is in a funny mood today. Purusha Sukta. Let me just do a quick Google search. Where is it? Yeah, 10.90. See,
Yes.
This I remembered. So the Purusha Sukta is 10.90. So we know it is in the new Rigveda, right? So now the new Rigveda is very natural, actually. Think about it. If it's the new Rigveda, it is in the mature Harappan phase. Indian society is becoming more cramped. More and more people are there. We are getting these classification ideas. And it eventually, over the period of time, in the next 2000 years, from the 10th mandala right up to 0, because mature Harappan is around 2400 BCE. Now we take 2400 years, an idea like what is mentioned in the Purusha Sukta. Don't you think it's reasonable to assume that it becomes a rigid society? Pretty rigid. I assume it was rigid even at that time, because just think like that. You have Rakhi Gadi. It has manual scavenging, right? Do you really think Rakhi Gadi was so awesome, and the Indus Valley people were so awesome that when we would have these manual scavenging things, everybody was like, "No, uncle, yesterday I took out your potty, today you take out my potty." Come on, it was not going to happen. Everybody must have assigned people to take out the potty, and who got the potty got a shitty deal. So we cannot ignore the fact that we had purity. I loved the word Ranajay Bhattacharya used on my podcast. He said this is not a caste issue. This is a purity and pollution issue.
Yes.
It is purity and pollution. Let us stop calling it caste. This is all I'm trying to say. The way I hope this answers everything you wanted to know, Ajinkya, because this is my
Yes.
view. We need to reject the matrix that Tony Joseph presents in his book. What is there caste in India, as in purity and pollution issues in India? Do we have Jati Varna issues in India? Does Hinduism have it? No matter what people say, I will say we have it, and we need to own up to it as good, honest Hindus. We need to own
Mm,
up to it.
mm, mm,
But that is what I'm trying to say. So the Tony Joseph game of bringing in step people, then imposing this, and then doing mental gymnastics around it is just a
mm.
load of bollocks. So good on you. You actually picked up a very good thing. Okay, Vrushal, what has Vrushal written? But the Chinese don't have a history of that level of casteism that I know. Although classism existed, that agrarian society was comparable to in our economic unique extreme. Oh, I agree, Vrushal. Like I said, now we did a PhD in this. Indians did a PhD in caste because we mixed class, and they were like, not good enough. Let us come up with a further classification. See, Indians are awesome in everything. See, we invent math, and then we invent the best third class caste system on planet Earth. So I am not saying Indians are some nice people in this. I am cursing the Indians for doing what they did. I am not some, Hindutva guy who's going to paint some merry picture about India. I actually think it's the curse of our society. Your listeners are doing a better job of triggering the non-left than you. You need to up your game. Okay, now that we have taken care of all the two questions, which I actually enjoyed the questions. So both Anita and Ajinkya, thanks for the amazing questions. I actually loved them. It made me think. So thank you for the questions. Now let's get into the main topic today. Okay, Ajinkya, now you can mute your mic. So it will be easier that way. All right, now we get into the discussion, what we call chapter 3, the chronology of the Rigveda. Cool. So, why now? What do we mean by the chronology of the Rigveda? So, just to give you a brief background, I don't know why religious people were like this, or why, if you don't want to use the religious people, past people were like this. Just look at the parallels, right? At least the Bible is chronological. Thank goodness. They started with Genesis and ended with Armageddon. So at least the first chapter and the last chapter are on point. So kudos to the Christians. They did a good job. But look at the Quran, completely unorganized. Otherwise, think about it. The Prophet was in the Mecca first, and then he went into Medina. But look at how the Quran is organized. Meccan verse, Medinan verse, Meccan verse, Medinan verse. It's all over the place. It's not chronologically arranged. But if you read the Quran chronologically, oh boy, you get an insight into the mind of Prophet Muhammad. I mean, you literally think like, oh man, this guy keeps coming up with verses like this. He faces a problem and he says, God says that, God says that, God did this, God did that. So now the same problem is there in our Rigveda. One is not one, it is actually all over the place. Six is one is somewhere in the middle. So now, how does Talagiri in this chapter? So first things first, get this thing in the mind. Now we'll discuss how do these people decide what is the oldest. By the way, another point I want to clarify: Talagiri has not come up with this classification or the chronology by himself. Talagiri has just read the material of the linguistic experts, and by and large, the chronology is the standard accepted chronology of the Rigveda across academia. This is not Talagiri's chronology. I repeat, this is a standard academic chronology. Now, in the first page itself, what does Talagiri say? Regarding the chronology of these mandalas, only two facts are generally recognized. The six family mandalas, 2 to 7, form the oldest core of the Rigveda. Two, the two serially last mandalas of the Rigveda, 9 and 10, are also the chronologically last in that order. And now Talagiri goes forward and he explains. Now, what does he do in this chapter? See, in this chapter, I don't want to rat a lot. I hope you guys have read this chapter. I want this to be more about you guys asking me questions and me answering them, because these are bloody 60 pages. I can go on and on and on and on, and I don't want to do that. So if you guys ask me questions, it will be the best part. But I will just give you a brief idea about what Talagiri has done. So what was does he say? I mean, I'm giving you page number according to my hard copy, so please don't hold me for that. So on page 37, what does Talagiri say? Says the main criteria which will help us establishing the chronological order of the mandalas are: one, the interrelationship amongst the composers of the hymns; two, the internal references to composers in other mandalas; three, the internal references to kings and rishis in the hymns; and then he goes on to mention, we will examine the whole subject under the following heads: interrelationships among composers, family structure and system of ascriptions, references to composers, references to kings and rishis, and the structure and formation of the Rigveda. The appendix, I don't think so. We need to discuss the appendix in this chapter, which is misinterpreted words. I mean, it's not like Michael Witzel is going to come and meet us and we are going to sit across and have a chai pe charcha with him. So I think we're going to skip the appendix. I mean, if you are a real nerd, you should read the appendix also, which is very interesting. I mean, I found it interesting, but we can skip it. So let's start with the interrelationships amongst the composers. Now, let's start with this. What did you guys understand? I can give you the explanation, but I want to know whether how far you guys have reached. So, why did you guys what did you guys understand when they said mandala 6 is the oldest of the early family mandalas? What did you understand? Why did you guys think? Anybody can speak up. I want to hear, because I want to know the baseline from where you are, then we can take it forward. So what did you guys think? Why do you think mandala 6 is the oldest of the early mandalas? Anybody can go, unmute yourself and speak up.
Because the rishis referred are ancestors and some are grandsons, something like that. It's
Because of the geographical location.
It's not something to do with the geography, because we can't skip to chapter 4 until we understand chapter 3.
Oh, actually, right now in chapter 6, I've forgotten what came in which chapter.
So no.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's more to do with the fact that it doesn't really contain any hymns from anybody who's a descendant. So all of the people are the original guys. So it's kind of like if you're writing a bunch of white papers or published papers, and you're referencing in your references, you reference all the people you've had, but you write a paper where you're not referencing anybody new, but other people are referencing you, for example, like if I write an engineering paper or something like that. So that's one way to kind of come back to what the chronology
Perfect.
was.
Perfect. That's why, see, that's all it is. And honestly, if you ask me, I don't know why Srikant Talagiri wrote 60 pages. The only way we can, this is my opinion, this is not Srikant Talagiri's opinion. I think even if Srikant Talagiri would have written the first head, the interrelationships among the composers of the hymns, the chronology of the Rigveda could have been easily established. The only problem we would have faced, in my view, for which we need part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, is the only one mandala, which is the pain in the ass in this entire discussion. Do you guys have any guesses? This is my view, but do you have any guesses? I think there's only one mandala. Number one, yeah, that's it. The only reason I think Talagiri had to go to 2, 3, 4, 5 and the appendices is because number one is all over the place. And that's the crux. So I think Vrushal has given the best answer. So that is the base. Now, what does Talagiri say? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I did find some issues. Maybe we can come up loop back around on it.
Sure.
But at least the way he's written, it ultimately answered all the questions that I had as I was reading it. But it wasn't clear from section, the table, the first table that he explains the chronology, where he explains the six mandals. It's actually not clear just logically which one came first, 6 or 3, or which one came first, 2 or 5. He actually explains it in the next section,
Yeah.
which eventually does clarify. But if you were just to go by, okay, here's the evidence or here's the logic, and then here's what we know so far. That table, it doesn't follow necessarily that 6 came from 3. But when you go to the next section, when he talks about the family purities, the references to the composers, and then the kings, that clinches it, and it makes sense logically. And then obviously when you go to the next chapter is completely there.
Yeah. So now in the first one, let's just read what Talagiri had to say. He clearly says that the Mandala 6 is the oldest of the early family mandalas, since descendants of its rishis are composers in two of the later family mandalas, 4 and 2. Like Vishal made a very brilliant point. It's basically, it's a what we can call a citation loop, right? That's the right word. So if we are looking at a citation loop, now the first step when we want to decide the chronology of the Vedas is who's citing whom. Now these guys were not citing anyone, right? The six ones. Everybody else says we cite him, or we talk of him, or we follow him, or we are of him. And it's basically that, to use very cheap Indian ways of saying, how, I'm a Punjabi, so we suck as people. So, how Punjabis are, every time you meet a Punjabi, Punjabi says, oh, I know that person, he's this of that and that. So this is basically the good old Indian way of finding out how the chronology of the Rigveda is. It's actually very typical of Indians. I mean, to be on a lighter side, the entire chronology of the Rigveda actually shows me the entire way Indians deal with each other. Everybody keeps, in Gujarati there is a word called vakhan. Everybody is doing vakhan of the other person. So this is basically a citation loop created where everybody is basically talking about the other person. So in that way, we have come across the entire system of the chronology of the Rig Veda. So where we start with 6, and then I'm going to read a few excerpts. I'm going to read from the book. I'll tell you why, because everybody is not live here, so maybe somebody listens to it later. So I'm just reading it for them who are going to watch this later. Mandala 5 is the latest of the later family mandalas, since it has hymns by descendants of rishis from two of the early family mandalas, 3 and 7. Like we mentioned, they're talking about them in a sense of we know them kind of a thing. Mandala 7 is the latest of the early family mandalas, since unlike Mandala 6 and 3, which do not have a single hymn composed by any descendant of any rishi from any other mandala, there are two joint hymns which are jointly composed by Vashishta and Kumara Agneya, a member of the Agneya group of Bharadwaja rishis, a descendant of Bharadwaja of Mandala 6. Mandala 4 is older than Mandala 2 because A, it has two hymns composed by descendants of rishis from Mandala 6, while the whole of Mandala 2, except for 4 hymns, is composed by descendants of rishis from Mandala 6. B, Mandala 2 goes on one generation further down than Mandala 4. Another point he says is Mandala 5, as we saw, has hymns from descendants of rishis from two of the early family mandalas, 3 and 7. In addition, it also has a hymn by descendants of a rishi who, although not himself a composer, is contemporaneous with Mandala 7. I don't need to read the specific hymn. Now the rest of the things, we can skip, because that is okay. He just talks about the rishis, the names of the rishis, the families, the mandalas. There they are. He's talking about the 54 hymns in mandala 1 fall into this category or that category. I don't think so. We need to do that. All he's trying to achieve from that, I mean, I can give you the reference page. It's 40 and 41. On 40 and 41, what he's trying to do is, by subdividing the rishis, the number of hymns they get and who's mentioning to whom, what he's trying to do is, the conclusion he wants to reach at is, the mandala 1 is later than the early family mandalas, but both earlier than as well as contemporary to the later family mandalas. Hence we get the following chronological order, where he talks about 637, then you have 1 running long, and you have 425. So that's his whole idea. So that's what he's trying to create. Yeah, order of hymns in mandalas in Rigveda is like the order of scenes in Memento. Yeah, it's actually true. It's true, quite true. That's such an amazing point. Okay, yeah, you had to add Ghajini, by the way. So another interesting point he makes following up to that is about Mandala 8. So what he mentions in Mandala 8 is that there are no two direct relationships between the composers of Mandala 8, the composers of the early family mandalas 637 and the two older of the later family mandalas 4 and 2. Again, he mentions a lot of family names. So what he's trying to establish is now what he's doing is by again placing the rishis and the descendants and the family names in a particular order. Again, page number 42 is where he draws the chart where basically in point number 2 is saying, in a, there are not only are there close relationships between the composers of Mandala 8 and the composers from Mandalas 1 and 5, but there are also many composers in common. So then he, gives the names. I'm not going to read the names. It doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, it'll go on forever. Then he comes up with the new chronology, which is 637. One goes long enough. You have 425, and then you have 8 below it. So 8 is the latest one in the early books. That's what he's trying to say. 8 is below them. Then we go into the Mandala 1 detail. Do you guys want to discuss the Mandala 1 detail? I think we can skip that because what he's done is he's basically created three categories in Mandala 1 where he says there are early Upamandalas. As you know, why is he calling them early Upamandalas? Because Mandala 1 has verses that go right up to the old time, then they go to the middle period, and then they go to the later period. So what he calls them is early Upamandalas, middle Upamandalas, late Upamandalas, and general Upamandalas. I want to say what general Upamandalas are when it comes to Mandala 1 of the Rigveda. Those Upamandalas which cannot be definitely designated as either early or late Upamandalas on the basis of interrelationships must be designated as general Upamandalas. So in Jat Bhasha, as I would use in Punjabi languages, जिसका कोई माई बाप नहीं. Basically, जिसका कोई माई बाप नहीं, they are general Upamandalas. Now again he goes into Mandala 10. Now Mandala 10 is Mandala 9. Now Mandala 9 again he goes ahead. He goes ahead and he's basically getting into the details again. These are the family details, and again we can skip this. Basically, what he's trying to do is he shows the relationship with the families, and again I've made the point where trying to establish that the chronological position of Mandala 9 is after 8 earlier mandalas. How does he satisfy that? I mean, I could give you a few examples like 49 of the hymns are ascribed to rishis belonging to a period of Mandala 9, that is, new rishis not found in earlier mandalas. Then there are 11 hymns that can be even alleged to have been composed by rishis belonging to 5 earlier family mandalas, which is 6, 3, 7, 4, and 2. Then there is one interesting point I heard. Where did it go, yeah? I forgot. Yeah. This point was interesting that he talks about in the end, which is page 48. He says ultimately the only two hymns which can be ascribed to rishis belonging to 5 earlier family mandalas and only for want of clear contrary evidence are, and he mentions 10.71 ascribed to Rishabha Veshwamitra of Mandala 3 and 9.71 and 9.90. It is therefore clear that Mandala 9 is a late Mandala and that there was not much of combing out of hymns to Soma from earlier mandalas in the process of its compilation. Now there is Mandala 10. Mandala 10 is actually pretty clear. There are multiple reasons why they call Mandala 10 the oldest. It is not only based on the names of the authors. If you guys remember, in the first two ones I had also mentioned, the newest one, sorry, matlab, I meant the newest, yeah. So it has also got to do with the language of the mandala itself. So the Mandala 10 language is very similar to the language. I mean, have any of you today who are live on the chat ever tried to read the Rigveda? Has anyone ever tried it? Just okay. So good, Jagannathan. If you have read it, did you notice when you actually try to read the Rigveda, the Sanskrit of 6, 2, 4, and all these ones are actually bloody different from 10. When I read 10, this is my personal experience, I thought I was reading like something like the Bhagavad Gita. I actually found it that I was reading the Sanskrit of the Bhagavad Gita and the Atharva Veda much more than when I was reading 6 or 7, because some of the words in 6 I just could not pronounce them. Like, my Sanskrit sucks anyways. Oh, you did not read Sanskrit, Devayan. I'm talking about when you read it in Sanskrit. So you actually start getting it. I'm just talking about just mantra ucharan. When you read the mantras, right? Some of the words in 6 and all the earlier ones, I just could not nail them. Like, I can't read them. Maybe I just suck as a human being because I I could not read them. But yeah, I found a lot of similarities in the Atharva Veda hymns and verses and 10. I found it. This is my personal experience of reading them. So again, now we go to Mandala 10. Mandala 10. So what does Talagiri say about that? The descriptions of hymns in this mandala is so chaotic, a very nice word, that in most of the hymns, the names or the patronymics, epithets, or both of the composers are fictitious, to the extent that in 44 hymns out of 191 and in parts of one more, the family identity of the composers is a total mystery. In many other hymns, the family identity, but not the actual identity of the composers, is clear or can be deduced. The hymns are ascribed to remote ancestors or even to mythical ancestors not known to have composed any hymns in earlier mandalas. Chronologically, the hymns in Mandala 10 fall in three categories: hymns composed in the final period of the Rigveda, long after the period of the other 9 mandalas; hymns composed in the period of 9 after the 8 earlier mandalas were finalized by composers whose Soma hymns find a place in the Mandala 9; hymns composed in the late period of Mandala 8 with somehow missed inclusion in that mandala. And basically, what he does in the rest of the chapter in relation to that is he tries to establish the early period, the middle period, and the late period, and the final period, the period of Mandala X. So, what is the early period? In conclusion, he says the period of Mandala 6, 3, 7, and the early Upamandalas of Mandala 1. The middle period is the period of Mandalas 4 and 2, and the middle Upamandalas of Mandala 1, as also the earlier part of the general Upamandalas of Mandala 1. Then you have the late period, the period of Mandalas 5 and 8, and the late Upamandalas of Mandala 1, as also the part of general Upamandalas of Mandala 1. And the period of Mandala 9, and then the final period is the period of Mandala X. Now, to wrap things up, what have we achieved till now is the chronology of the Rigveda on the basis of the authors or the composers of the Rigveda. Like we said, we created a citation loop. What happens in the citation loop is, when we see the citation loop being created, and we clearly find an answer. But we also have to add another point, like we did in Mandala 10. Not only is the citation loop the only criteria, actually the language of the Rigveda itself linguistically changes in the 10th mandala. I would highly recommend everyone do this. Find the Rigveda on the internet. It's available for free. I'm sure it's available for free. If it's not, shame on the Hindus then. Sanskrit translation. Just try to follow this chronology. Read random verses that Talagiri mentions in the book. Read the verses which he actually calls the early verses of those mandalas itself. Try to read the Sanskrit and then compare it with the later ones, like 10, and you'll see the Sanskrit change. And that's the fascinating part. So why I'm keep on reiterating this is, I did not trust Talagiri. Not that I had any issues with him, but I read everything with a natural skepticism. I don't know why I am, but I'm made like that. I did not want to believe Talagiri. So what I did was, I was like, let me test this guy. He makes these claims. Let me actually go and see. And when I actually experienced it, no, the language has genuinely changed in 10. That's when I was like, no, this man, he's actually making a fair point. Now we go into the family structure of the mandalas. Do you guys have any questions about the family structure of the mandalas? First, let's take the questions. It's better, because I don't want to make it me talking all the time. Anybody can unmute themselves. All right, Anita. Anybody else has questions? Go for it. Nope. Okay, cool. Now let's go into the family structure of the mandalas. To me, this is a very important point from a debate issue. So, what I want to mention the most, why we should always remember this point as a factoid. When we are having discussions on RN invasion and RN migration, and we need to drop in some factoids. This is a very important factoid in this entire debate, because if you're going to talk to someone and you're going to say, oh, six is the oldest one. So, yeah, citation loop is one way you can explain it. But this is another very important point. And I actually found it fascinating too, that how we actually evolved, how this society evolved is actually very interesting. So if you remember page 51, if you guys have read it, so what are, if the mandalas of the Rigveda are arranged in the order of gradation in family structure, that is from the purest family structure to the least pure one, the arrangement tallies perfectly with our chronological order. I'm going to read a bit of it. Firstly, the family mandalas. The Bharadwaj mandala 6 has Bharadwajas as composers in every single hymn and verse. Non Bharadwajas are totally absent in this mandala. This is actually a very important point. This is also one of the very important reasons why 6 has to be the oldest. Basically, is all about one person. Another side point I want to add to this whole issue is, it might trigger some of you, because look, you're talking to a Gnostic, so I don't look at the Rigveda as a divine book. So I apologize in advance if anybody is triggered. I look at these books as books written by men of olden times. And Talagiri also looks at it from that lens. I just want to clarify. What I found fascinating was that Talagiri has often made the point that Rigveda primarily is actually the book of the Puru tribe. If you read the Rigveda, even if you read Griffith's translation, for example, if you read it, excuse me, you'll find that it is from the point of view of that tribe, the Purus. And if you read the development, I don't know why my throat's gone. So if you're reading the Rigveda, you'll see the development of the Rigveda and the development of that periphery all the time. This is more of an anthropological issue, not an Aryan invasion issue, but I thought I'll just mention it as a side thing, that how the Rigveda also develops. Because look at it. 6 is entirely Bharadwaj Mandala. Then you have 3. The Vishwamitra Mandala has Vishwamitra as composers in every single hymn, but you have non-Vishwamitras are present as junior partners. See the evolution of the Rigveda. But non-Vishwamitras are present as junior partners, with the Vishwamitras in 2 hymns, 1 out of 11 verses in hymn 36 and 3 out of 18 verses in hymn 62. Now I'm not going to give you the numbers for the later ones. Then you have the Vashishta Mandala 7. It has Vashishtas as composers in every single hymn, but non-Vashishtas are present as equal partners with Vashishtas in 2 hymns. Then you have the Vamadeva Mandala. It is 4, has non-Vamadevas as sole composers in 2 hymns. These non-Vamadevas, however, belong to the same Angiras family as the Vamadevas and share the same Apari Sukta. The Grihastha Mada Mandala, which is 2, has non-Grihastha Madas as sole composers in 4 hymns. These non-Grihastha Madas belong to a family related to Grihastha Madas, being Bhrigus, while the Grihastha Madas are Keval Bhrigus but having different Apari Suktas. The Atri Mandala 5 has non-Atris as sole composers in 7 hymns. These non-Atris belong to 4 different families not related to the Atris and having different Apri Suktas. Then you have the non-family mandalas. Mandala 1 is a collection of some small family upamandalas. Mandala 3 is not a family mandala, but one family, the Kamas, still dominate the mandala by a slight edge. And Mandala 9 is definitely not a family mandala, having hymns or verses composed by every single one of the 10 families. The dominant families is the Kashyapas. And then Mandala 10, the latest, has by any standard is not associated with any particular family. We already know that from our previous description. Somebody has asked the question, how the Bhrigus came from outside and became the main people is quite fascinating. Well, I mean, the Brigus came, the Greeks came, the Huns came, the Kushans came. I mean, it just shows that kind of an open society. And no, we accepted everyone. It's just that the Abrahamic religions don't like accepting us.
What I was saying is it started off as priests of the enemies, and then they came in, and then they ended up becoming the caretakers and the main people. So that's quite a movement.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as a society, like I said, it shows the openness of the at least the early to mid Rigvedic society. I would say that. I don't know what happens to the 9 and 10 Rigvedic society. I definitely feel it becomes far more starts becoming more archaic and rigid at that time. By that time, you have your clans and groups are kind of set. But the early Rigvedic society, it's also, it could also be because, yeah, just think about it. Population. What was the bloody population at that time? I mean, look at us living in Mumbai. Even if we want to accept anyone, we can't. There's just too many of us. At that time, how many human beings were really there? So, it was far easier. I mean, there were downsides because when you suddenly see humans, you tend to attack them more too. And that thing doesn't happen now because we are kind of forced to live with each other, and liberalism is a little, you know,
Actually, you're wrong there. It happens all the time. In America, you see someone with a MAGA hat, you attack him. Here, you see, here in Mumbai, you see, UPites and Biharis, you attack them. You go to Tamil Nadu, you find someone speaking Hindi, you attack them. That is still there.
yeah, it's there, but I think we still live in far more liberal times than the past. Think about it. This kind of urbanization has never happened in the past. It never did. But if you look at it from a purely anthropological perspective, what I found fascinating was how the Rigveda was structured in the early days, where you had literally got monopolies of families. There were certain families doing certain things, and then it basically kind of disperses. It is not Talagiri's point. Don't get me wrong. Talagiri does not make this point. This is me extracting something out of Talagiri's thing. And then obviously, let's go now to the system of ascriptions. I don't think so. We need to mention that. I mean, he's just basically written the total number of hymns mandala wise, total number of rishis, maximum number of rishi hymns ascribed to the one rishi. And basically what he's trying to show is, if you look at the ascriptions of the hymns, this is I think, Rushal, this was the point you were trying to make, right, earlier on, that you did not understand it then, and then when you read the ascriptions, that's when you got the clarification, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this the way he structured the chapter, he could have held off on the conclusion until later on, but it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Really. Like ultimately, the answer is what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was an important kind of section for me personally because it's another clinches. There was a change in ascription. It's almost like the original ones were kind of like book publishers. Like now even say, oh, Random House or Penguin published this kind of thing.
Yes.
Whereas now later on you have more kind of independent people like, oh, YouTube, Chal Mera had this kind of thing. You don't say YouTube published it.
Hmm.
You kind of see more different kind of thing. Anyway, that might be taking it too far, but it's there was definitely a change in, and that shows the chronology a little bit more.
Yeah, not only does it show the chronology of the both, that's why I wanted to discuss the anthropology. You made a brilliant point here that it also shows the change of the humans over a period of time, because uh, eventually the Talagiri's claim is that the date of the Rigveda, the the early mandalas, which is 6, I'm talking about the date from 6 to 10, that period. 6 goes 3000 BC and before, and 10 he takes up to what I remember now is either 1700 or 1400. So the Rigveda and the composition of these hymns and all these things is such a huge time frame. Now you look at this, almost 2000 plus year time frame of composition of this particular set of book and hymns and verses, and just think about it. Obviously human beings are also changing, right? So there is so many, it's such a gold mine actually, of how their attitude towards life, or their theological attitudes, or their theological claims, etc., keep changing over a period of time. Because if you look at all the Upanishads and the philosophies, they are all at the later period. I mean, the fag end of the Rigveda, post Rigveda. So all the philosophies that come out, in the Bihar area, while the Rigveda Talagiri places it in the Haryana Punjab area. So if you connect all of them and look at it at a purely philosophical point of view, you will understand how humans, native humans in this part of India, are actually evolving slowly and changing as people. Anyways, I thought it was a very interesting thing that I observed when I was, reading the book and later on checking it in the Rigveda too. So the rest of the chapter, I think the references to the composers, again, he's divided them as the early mandalas and the upamandalas, the middle mandalas and the upamandalas, and the late mandalas and the upamandalas. It's just, again, he keeps on doing the same thing, and then he goes on to, you know, right up to mandala 10, and then he comes up with a further refined chronology where you have 637, early one, then you have middle one and four, general one and two, late one, which goes slightly after 5-2 and parallel to 8. So the late one is with 5 and 8, and then you have 9 somewhere parallel to 8 and some sections of late one, and then you have 10. And how has he justified that? Well, he's basically given you details of all the cross references in each and every mandala, and its relationship to the composers. I mean, if you want, I can give you examples like, let's say, the early mandalas and the upamandalas, where he says the two oldest mandalas 6 and 3 do not refer to a single composer from any other mandala. The third oldest mandala 7 refers to one composer from the older mandala 3, which is Jamadagni. So it's just stuff like that. And it goes on and on and on. So basically, what he's done is, again, he's used the references to do that. The fourth part is the references to the kings and the rishis, and in this, obviously, he's created a chronology of all the kings and the rishis that are mentioned in the Rig Veda, starting from the Bharatas, which is Bharata, Devavata, Srinjaya, what is this? Badhrya, Shwa, Divodasha, Pratardana, Pijavana, Devashravas, Sudas, Sahadeva, Somaka. Now, did you guys have any questions about this part? The references to the kings and rishis? It's actually pretty simple. If you crack number 1 and number 2, you crack number 3. It's pretty much the same thing. So, anybody has any questions here? I'll be more than happy to answer them. Anyone? All right. Okay, cool. So you guys get that, right? Because I don't need to mention it, otherwise the video will become too long and I'll go on ratting on and on and on and on and on. Because I want to get into some other aspects where I want to ask you a few questions. So if you guys want any other detail, because basically it is again the same order where he mentions the king's names, he analyzes which king is mentioned in which mandala. Why are those kings mentioned? In what context are those kings mentioned? Are those kings mentioned as a first order or a second order, or in the sense of is it directly talking about them, or it is talking about them in a past tense or in a future tense? You get what I'm trying to say, right? This is what he does. So basically, it's like, let's say Vrushal mentions in a verse that, I bow down to King so and so. Now, the way that verse might be centered is that if Rushal is talking in the present tense, that that king might well be that priest's king at that time. Then we look at the verse and we look at the mandala. And if we look at the mandala, let's say, for example, we go to the Bharata dynasty. Chalo, let's discuss the Bharatas. So what happens with the Bharatas? The Bharatas are mentioned where? They are mentioned in Mandala 6, 16 and 4. So basically Bharata is the eponymous ancestor of this dynasty. And then we get into Devavata. Now how do we know Devavata is in a particular thing? Where is he mentioned? He's mentioned in 3:23.2, 3, 4, 15.4, 6, 27.7, 7, 18.22. What is interesting in that is Devavata is referred to as an ancestor, of Srinjaya. If Devavata is an ancestor of Srinjaya, you know where he has to be placed. And they were Shravas and Sudas. So that is all. And Sinjaya is referred to as a descendant of Devavata. So there you go. So you know Srinjaya is a descendant of X and X is an ancestor of Y. So that's how you place everything. And then what we do is do these names and do these classifications, then fall into the same classification that we discussed with the composers and the references to the composers, the ascriptions we talk about, and the previous classification of the first one where we talk about the interrelationships amongst the composers. So if all of them fall in the same way, the chronology of the Rigveda is correct. Now there was something mentioned of the minor kings and rishis. I don't think so. That was very important. It really doesn't add any value to anything. Neither does the Trikshi dynasty add any value. Do you guys really want to know about the Trikshi dynasty? I think it added no value to the argument per se, to be very honest, in my view. Do you guys have any questions? I guess nobody has questions. So let me move forward. In the section 5, which I think is the last section we need to discuss, so what he says is the structure and formation of the Rigveda can be summarized from various angles. A, the order of the mandalas, B, the formation of the Rigveda, the chronology of the rishis, and the chronology of the mandalas. And we know the chronological orders of the mandalas, as we saw, is 6, 3, 7, 4, 2, 5, 8, 9, and 10, with the chronological period of mandala spread out over the periods at least 4 other mandalas, 4, 2, 5, and 8. This is your final chronology of the Rigveda. The chronology of the rishis was clearly mentioned. The chronology of the mandalas was clearly mentioned. I wish I could share this screen. Let me see. I think we should mention this screen. Let me get the Voice of Dharma screen. I hope they have the same screen there, because I loved this. Did you guys see, all of you, the page 76 screen? I thought that was just a brilliant chart. The way he has put it, it was just mind blowing. I loved it. Page 76. Let me see. Where is it? I think this is the one here. Nope. Is this a chronology of the mandal? I think this is the one, right? Yes, this is the one. I think this image sums everything up. To me, this was just brilliant. Did you guys see this one? See how he's mapped all of them out? The early Bharata period. You have Brihaspati, Bharadwaj, Vishwamitra, Vashishta. You see how he's gone about it? 6, 3, 7, early. The middle Bharata, Virgatmas, Kaksivan, Gautama. This made it so clear for me personally. I don't know about you guys, but this was just brilliant. And then the late general Puru period. You see, you have late 1, 5, 3, 9, and the final general Puru period. This is basically the culmination of the entire discussion. This was brilliant. To me, this was the best way of explaining. When I looked at this, I got so much clarity. And then this last image. I loved this last image too, which was on page 78. This was a chart he created. I don't know if you guys saw this chart. I love this chart too. Anybody is going to watch it later. So this is how he's created. 6, 3, 7 early 1, 4, 2 middle 1, early general 1, 5, 8, 9 late 1, late general 1, 10. I actually know some people, you guys will be shocked. They have memorized this order like a phone number. I have not done that because it's not my cup of tea. But yeah, there are people. We're gonna skip the appendices. Do you guys really want to discuss the appendices? I honestly don't see any value in them. Do you guys want to? Just let me know. I don't see any value in the appendices. I mean, I personally thought, yeah, the argument was made without the appendices too. Now I wanted to, wrap it up. But before wrapping it up, I just wanted to summarize something. So, what have we learned from the chronology of the Rigvedas today? I think the most important thing that we have learned from the chronology of the Rigveda, outside of what Talagiri is trying to say, is I think personally, which is what we need to understand when we debate Aryan invasion and migration with people who support Aryan invasion and migration. The people who support Aryan invasion and migration do not have the divine perspective. They have an anthropological, archaeological, non-divine perspective. So whenever you guys sit down and actually have a debate with these kinds of people, or you try to put a point across to these kinds of people, you have to leave that aspect in your brain aside. You cannot bring the upper share perspective in a discussion like this. You can believe it in in it personally. I'm not saying whether don't believe in it. You can. But when you have this discussion and when you look at this book and when you look at this entire discussion about the Rigveda, you have to leave the Aparashaya perspective aside. Otherwise, you will always have doubts about Talagiri and the claims he makes. Let me tell you, I have checked each and every source Talagiri said. In the start of the book, he gives the bibliography. I don't know about the online version, but in the start of the book, he's given his bibliography. You can judge me all you want. I actually checked 70% of his bibliography. Literally went and checked them in libraries. Man is brilliant. And to me, in this entire book, the most important chapter of the entire book is chapter 3, the chronology of the Rigvedas. Once we have established this is the chronology of the Rigvedas, we just have to show the date then. We have to date the mandalas, and once we date the mandalas, and if they don't fall into the category of the AIT AMT people, we have nailed it, and it is dead. And I still say what the archaeology has said is a separate issue. The most clinching argument against Aryan invasion and Aryan migration is the chronology of the Rigveda presented by Srikant Talagiri. There is no other argument that is clinching. Personally, I used to be a pro AIT guy. I've said it before, I'm saying it again. When I read this damn book, it just shattered me. It shattered me completely. I was like, God damn, what a man. How did he come up with this thing? So I think I have said what I had to say. Now I really want to hear from you guys. Let's have five to 7 minutes of quick Q questions. If you guys have any and comments. Uh, Rushal has asked question on the final chart. How does Mr. Talagiri come up with how long each epoch lasted? Rushal, when we read the book, you'll get all the answers. It's basically he is going to answer all those questions. And another point, Rushal, I want to add. I think in Rigveda and the historical analysis, he places the land of the Purus earlier on. Again, Debayan will correct me if I'm wrong because Debayan has read the book before. I think in this book he places it in Kashmir, right? And in the next book he goes to Haryana, right? Debayan, if I remember correctly. See, yeah. So he corrects himself. No, no, I think he says Kashmir.
So I read the next chapter and he mentioned he talks about Haryana being important, Kurukshetra being important.
Important, but he doesn't place it there. He doesn't place it there. He places it firmly in the next book, not in this book. But yeah, Western UP. But I thought he also mentions Kashmir. Oh, maybe he mentioned Kashmir in the very first book, Aryan Invasion Theory. Maybe that was the case. Maybe I've confused it with that because once I was reading it somewhere. Because Devayan, have you read Genetics and the Aryan Debate? That one? I think he mentions the Kashmir point in that, where he changes it. Maybe my memory is not serving me properly, but he's changed the location. But he changed the location of the Purus from this book to the next book, Rigveda and the Avesta. And that's what I remember. Sri Hari, speak up, Devayan.
So, you're typing a lot. Yeah.
So I now want to hear from you guys. So what would, okay, I just want to understand, what did you guys feel when you were reading this book? Keep your personal spiritual beliefs aside. What were you feeling when you were reading this chapter? Because this is very important. Because until and unless you don't get this chapter, you don't get the rest of the book. Until and unless you don't buy the chronology of the Rigveda, you don't buy anything else. So please, I know you guys must be thinking, "Sala, ये अपना time क्यों waste कर रहे हैं Patreon पे?" But trust me, I want you guys to have utmost clarity, because if you're giving me X amount of rupees or dollars a month, it is my moral responsibility to make sure that you guys crack this bloody book. That's why I'm doing this. Trust me, there is no other reason. Anybody, Devayan, anyone? What did you guys think when you were reading this chapter?
Yeah, I think this chapter was I mean, it took me a time. I kept going back and again to, to read all his points, those A, B, C, that, okay, this book is before that because of this book is after this because of that. I mean, it was really interesting. And he has some diagrams in that book, after every section, he gives a diagram at what he has arrived after analysis, and then he keeps updating it. I mean, it was really interesting for me.
Anybody else? I want to hear from you guys.
Yeah, in my case, before I read this book, I didn't have much idea about the Rigveda, the mandalas. I just knew vaguely that we had 4 Vedas, but only after reading his book, I know a lot more now than just a month ago.
Okay, this is actually an awesome point. How many of you actually knew that there was something called the chronology of the Rigvedas before even reading, before Talagiri, you came across Talagiri? How many of you knew there was something called the chronology of the Rigvedas? Anybody? Did you know that Rigveda was having a certain chronology? Yeah, see, most of you guys did not know about the chronology. Vrushal, did you know about the chronology of the Rigveda? That there was a certain thing?
I didn't, but I also didn't seek it out.
Cool. So for me, I came across the chronology of the Rigveda first time when I actually read Vitzel, of all the people, because I actually did not come across this concept when I read Talagiri. I came across Talagiri far later. As I said, I was pro AIT, so for me, I had an idea that there is something called the chronology of the Rigveda. Also, partially because I always thought, the religious people just sucked at chronology, so this book has to be chronologically all over the place. But Witzel is a major trigger. But Anita, Witzel, do you realize, right? Witzel offered Talagiri a PhD. How many of you know that fact? Do you guys know? Witzel actually offered Talagiri a PhD. Yeah. See, Anita did not know that. So this was the conversation. So Witzel invited Talagiri to Harvard for a PhD program after Talagiri came up with his book and said, "You can join me, but you'll have to have, quotes, open mind." And then Talagiri said, "When you say open mind, does it mean that only I have to have an open mind, or both of us have to have an open mind?" And the rest was, as they say, is history. Witzel wrote a long, scathing review of Talagiri's book, and after that, they have never spoken to each other. So that was the most funniest incident I've ever seen. Talk about snowflakery. I think Witzel was the most snowflakish guy ever when it comes to this. I mean, trust me, I have known Srikant sir now from 2009 or 10. I came across Srikant sir in late 2009, early 2010. I spoke to him today too. We had a long conversation. He always likes to know what we are doing here, what are the discussions we are having here. So I told him that in my years, I have never come across a more simple man than Srikant Talagiri. And I was shocked that Witzel actually found Talagiri so intimidating. So Srihari asked him to become a patron. By the way, just to let you guys know, Talagiri told me If they have questions, even after they have dealt with you, I will answer all of them. Just, but let's get over this book. After that, you guys have any questions, email them to me. I will send them to Talagiri ji, and I will create a short video for all of you where Talagiri will answer your questions. Beyond all of that, he has already told me, he's promised me he'll do it for me. He told me that, but he was like, यार कुशल, पहले you go through the, then वो कहते हैं ना कि the sugar cane is going through the machine, पहले गन्ने को पूरा चूस लो, फिर लास्ट में कुछ गन्ने में रस बचा होगा वो मैं देख लूंगा. So let's go through the process. So let's, पहले आप मुझे चूस लो, जब मुझे चूस के हो जाएगा उसके बाद आप लोगों को जो क्वेश्चन होंगे वो श्रीकांत तलगिरी से आंसर करवा देंगे, and I guarantee you it will happen. Srikant Talagiri will answer your questions. One author I have full access to is Srikant Talagiri. I don't give you any assurances for any other author. Like I'll tell you today, when I was struggling about Rigveda and the Avesta, he told me on the phone, I will send you the PDF, give it to everyone. I was like, sir, you are a socialist, I'm a capitalist. That is for another day. Let people buy your book. So that's the discussion we had today. But he did not agree with me. He actually told me, "ये गलत है कुशल, तुम ऐसे कर रहे हो." It's okay, but so I think we've covered everything up, guys. Please, if you have any other question, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer. Anyone, Ajinkya, Anita, Devayan, Rushal, Srihari, others.
It's on the chronology. Sorry, the more of
Yeah,
the
Rushal,
mandalas.
please.
Within each mandala, to me, am I frozen here? Kushal, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, you were frozen, and then we thought you lost you for a
Oh,
bit.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, so just one thing that related was, what's interesting is that even though these were different patronized systems, or families, or whatever you want to call them, institutions, kingdoms, tribes, they had a common understanding of the natural forces, and they had to have some kind of basis in common. So even though they were competitive, they were still within mutual understanding of what the rules are, and what how their metaphysics worked at that time, really. And to me, that is an interesting kind of something that you can glean out of this, even though the chronology is there, which is the crux of, and I can clearly tell that that's going to form the backbone of all the future arguments. But you can kind of observe that there was this uh, common system, and this is why they were kind of, you could call it one civilization, right? One common, it might be an expanding civilization, or influence, but they had to agree on something. They weren't really they might have been arguing some petty arguments, but it seems like it's more like that is more to do with what benefit they're going to get, and how what benefit they want their tribe to get. But a lot of the metaphysics, epistemology, they seem to be agreeing upon,
Oh,
and language.
oh yes. So I would say I'm going to look at it from an evolutionary lens and give you this answer. This is not Talagiri's answer. This is my answer. Naturally, the metaphysics and a lot of the claims they make are going to be a direct outcome. I mean, look, most early humans were animists, right? See, this Abrahamization of the world has happened only post Judaism. I mean, most religions, for the lack of word, or belief systems, or nemoplexes that existed at that time, basically were pretty much what you call, right? And if you see, a lot of elements of nature are worshipped in the Rigveda, and then you map it to the flora and fauna of India at that time. Because if you read the verses of the Rigveda, it keeps talking about India, right? It doesn't talk about anything else. It doesn't talk about some foreign land. Apparently, they came from outside, but they were so obsessed with this land that they don't even bother about talking about the past land. They keep talking about us. So, in that sense, but let me tell you, if you were to read the Rigveda, the rishis can be feisty at times towards each other. I've read it. Trust me. You should read it. Start with Griffith's translation. Don't take him seriously, but how bad could Griffith be? Is my point. How? Okay, he messed up the meaning of dasas. He said dasas are slaves. Okay, I grant that. But there are cases where the rishis are kind of nasty to each other too many times. It is existing there. But yeah, I get your point that the overall metaphysics of the Rigveda is very similar. But here's my counter. The overall metaphysics of the Rigveda is pretty much from the point of view of the Purus, the Puru tribe. Yes, because of evolutionary reasons, a lot of claims are going to be similar. Like I don't remember what was the name of the Iranians. Devayan, what was the Iranians? Were they the Anus or the what were the Iranians? I keep Anus, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe the metaphysics of the Anus and the Ikshwakus, especially the Anus and the Purus, you might have similarities between them. I mean, very interestingly, I mean, if you look at fire, fire was a Anu thing, right? The Iranians got it to us. Purus digested it from the Anus, basically. So there are many things like vegetarianism is a Jain thing, right? It was not like vegetarianism was very Hindu. I know these are very triggering things, but facts are facts. We were meat eaters. It's not like we weren't. We did eat meat, but the beauty of our society, caste is the curse of our society. Let us establish that. We have done a PhD in that. But we also have a beautiful side to our society. This society came up with a beautiful system where we are far more mentally capable of absorbing things from everywhere. So the Anus were talking about XYZ, we would absorb it. The Jainas were talking about ABC, we would absorb it. We would digest it. We would take it and we would make it our own. The only thing a good friend of mine, he said that a fundamental error or a good thing, I don't know, I have no opinion on it, but he makes a very interesting point. He's like, हमने सबको अपना भगवान बना लिया, जीसस को क्यों नहीं बनाया? I gave him an answer that वो बनना नहीं चाहते थे, that they did not want to become that. That's why we did not make Jesus our own. But you look at it, Buddha is a avatara, Vishnu avatara. Anita, I don't know about the beef statement in the Vedas because that's a translation issue. What I'm saying is we were meat eaters. Because some translations of the Vedas say beef, some says no beef. I don't want to get into that at all. But I'm saying we were meat eaters. That's all I want to say. I want to say agnostic to, because look, I'm not a Sanskritist, right? I can't say which translation is correct. I can say Nityananda Mishra is a damn good Sanskritist. So I can say we can go by his version. Definitely Griffith has mistakes. I can guarantee you that. Like, it is obvious that dasas are not slaves. Dasas are also religious devotees. I can guarantee you that. But in the entire Griffith translation, everywhere Griffith has called dasas as slaves. It is wrong. I will tell you that it is wrong. But I don't know about the beef part. So I stay agnostic to it. I can tell you one more thing. The Arya Samaj translation of the Vedas is wrong. That too is wrong. They to have changed the Rigveda and they just put it upside down, and the Hindi translation, you should read it. You'll start laughing actually. The Dasharajnya war is non-existent in the entire Rigveda. Imagine. There is no Dasharajnya war in the Rigveda of the Arya Samaj. Everything is metaphorical and imaginary for them. So these are issues I am not equipped to answer. But yes, what Vrushal asked, and it more than asking, I think Vrushal made an observation about metaphysical similarities. There are multiple reasons for metaphysical similarities. I guess we've covered everything. Anything else, guys, or we can wrap things up? I guess we can wrap things up. Nobody has any questions. So yeah, cool. So this we conclude session 3. Next time we are going to be discussing chapter 4, which is the geography of the Rigveda. I think that is another interesting topic. And if you're going to be watching this video right now and you've not seen number one and number two, please don't do that. Watch number one, number two, and number three. Then only you'll get the book, because the way Talagiri has written this book, it is in a sequence. Like I always say this, to understand the work of Talagiri, you have to go in a sequence. His writing pattern is of a type. I've understood his pattern because I've read him extensively for over the years. When I say this, follow the chronological order of Srikant Talagiri, then only you will get it. So even when you watch this video, if you're a patron who's going to watch it later, watch video number one, video number two, and then video number three. So on that note, namaste, goodbye, take care, guys.